Stephen Jones joins us right here on the KNC Masterpiece on 105.3 The Fan. Stephen, are you guys on cloud nine after the pick last night?
We are. We're, it's one of those you wake up and it feels even better. And, obviously, you had some, a little bit of angst there because, we were thinking coming in, defense might be a little priority over that receiver spot. But as, we'd mentioned several times before the draft started, certainly receiver, was certainly an area that we wanted to address in this draft. But, when it played out there and CeeDee Lamb was sitting there, who was our best receiver on the board, sixth player on our board, it was just too good to pass up. And, he's a competitor. He's been a great player there at Oklahoma. I think he's going to be a great fit, in our offense and complement Amari and Michael Gallup and Blake Jarwin and Zeke and Dak and that great offensive line, that we put together. I think our offense is in great shape.
There was no hesitation at all when you see CeeDee Lamb and you still had these other plans that you were already thinking about?
Well, you play out everything. You go through it. You always do. We were kind of, had a group of players there when we start to get about 4 or 5 picks out. You're kind of starting to look at the guys you've, would be interesting in picking that are still out there. And certainly a lot of those guys were coming off the board as we moved down toward our pick. We were eliminating possibilities. But certainly when it got there, we, entertained, as Jerry said, I think 3 different trade opportunities. And then certainly looked at a couple of other players that we had ranked high on our board. But at the end of the day, our gut instincts prevailed that you take the best player available, and those things work themselves out in terms of how it plays out. And as we said, that receiver position was something that we did want to address, at some point early in the draft, to replace the loss of Cobb.
Stephen, were those trade opportunities coming like at pick 15 or 16, or did your phones get flooded when CeeDee Lamb, a guy that most people probably had rated higher than 17 on their board, was there available to try to trade up for?
We got one call about 2 picks out that said they were going to be interested in our pick. And then we got 2 calls while we were on the clock. So, that was kind of how that played out. But 2 of them while we were on the clock, and one of them that was giving us a call that, that they'd be interested in the pick if we were willing to come out of it.
Can you, I don't know if you just know this information offhand or if you can share it with us, how many remaining first-round grades that are still out there for you guys?
Yeah, we don't like to get into disclosing that before it's time, but we still have a player or 2 that we have first-round grades on.
If that's the case then, and you talked about teams calling you, do you guys overnight this morning, whenever it is, do you sit there and say, hey, do we think enough of this player that we would want to try to make a run at one of the earlier picks in this round?
It's one of the things you got to take into account here, guys, is it's when there's just a tenth of a point, in our grading system, the lowest first round grade you can have is a 118, and then the next grade down is a 120. When we have half a dozen 120s sitting up there, and your remaining players are 118s, as you can see, there's barely a difference.
Yeah.
In terms of the deal there, and you got to really decide whether you'd rather have just 1 player or 2 players, and because you're obviously going to have to give up a significant pick to move from the middle of the second to the top of the second. You're probably talking about giving up your 3rd round pick, and when you really feel that pain, because we feel like we've got a great board up and we feel like we're going to get 2 really good football players by sitting still, it's real painful to want to move up.
Stephen, as a Cowboy fan, I'm calling my father. I'm calling my friends. We're texting each other. It's tough to go to sleep after the first round. I'm just wondering from your perspective, because you're part of the decision making on making now the 2nd round pick and the 3rd round pick. How tough is it for you to go to sleep without wanting to call up Jerry and call up Mike McCarthy and call up Will McClay and just start having 1,000 conversations, and before you know it, at 7 a.m., you're like, holy cow, it's ready for the next day?
Well, that's how it works. I mean, obviously your adrenaline's pumped, and usually you're up there together, so you end up sitting up there half the, deep into the morning, really enjoying, what you've done, but knowing that, the good news about this is we don't pick again till tonight, so you kind of got the day to, really start to talk about your strategy for the next day, and which we've already started on, but. It is hard, and, it was particularly hard last night because you're not together. But we did sit on a while, and then, of course, as you know, we had a press conference. I don't think that ended until about 12:15. So, it was certainly a late night, early morning type deal. But we're certainly, that adrenaline's still going, and we're ready to get some great football plays.
Stephen, what kind of player – in y'all's mind, do you see CeeDee Lamb becoming? What kind of comparison would you say you see with him to a player that may have already played in the NFL?
Well, we look at a slot receiver kind of like a nickel corner. I mean, they're starters this day and time in this space game we play. They're going to play a big majority of your snaps, and the way we move the receivers around. I mean, he's going to. He's a starter type. He's a walk-in starter type player for us in terms of, he'll probably start in that slot, and that's one of the things that made him so, so valuable to us in terms of how we had him rated on our board is he can improve, and he's a smart player that can play all three spots. He can go in the slot, natural that they're in the slot, a great route runner. So many things we can do with him. Obviously, Amari's got some of that same flexibility in terms of being able to play in the slot. So, it's a good group. And then at some point, we'll have to make a decision. When Gallup comes up for contract, that's going to be a lot of money there and probably going to be hard to keep, to keep everybody. So, he eventually, obviously, can make his way. And we had a grade that, said that the guy quickly works his way into being a number one caliber type receiver. So, he fits all the options that you want there in terms of finding a great receiver. And as you know, this day and time, you need three of them. I mean, we transitioned. We got lucky. We had a great player there in Cole Beasley who did a lot of great things out of the slot. Obviously, CeeDee's got the upside and the length to go be a 2 or a 1. And then we transitioned, of course, into Cobb, who did a great job for us last year. And, with Mike's history, and the way he's moved the ball, he's always, wanted the deep set of receivers, and this certainly, helped us get that done.
Well, I don't think we should be hyping up Michael Gallup too much because we want to keep that price low. So let's not talk too much positive about him and how much money he's going to cost. We need to keep those prices low. I'm curious if you could – I know you kind of talked about it, but can you walk us through – balancing, I guess, all of your emotions leading into that pick, because I know you don't want to fall in love with one specific player, but you're also trying to handle draft moves. You're waiting to see what the teams in front of you do. Are you sitting waiting for that Atlanta pick and you're like, don't be CeeDee Lamb? Or walk us through some of those emotions while you're also trying to balance. Do we trade this pick? What do we do?
Well, in general, you do your homework and you do a pretty good job of it, but every now and then you get the surprise. And the surprise this year, of course, was CeeDee Lamb being there. You start, when first of all, there wasn't a receiver picked in the top 10, and then the first one was Ruggs. We thought it would be either, we thought it might be either, CeeDee Lamb or, the other Alabama
Judy,
receiver, Judy, that, and when he goes and you start to think, well, maybe we're going to have one of our top receivers fall right in our lap. And then, of course, we're monitoring the other players that we like on the board. So, it's try not to pay a lot of attention to it, in the first 10 picks. But once you get to that pick 10, the adrenaline starts to rise, and you're getting ready to be on the board inside of an hour. So, you really start to, go through all the different machinations in your mind. You've obviously gone over all the things you need if there was just the right trade there and what it would take depending on which team calls. So, you really start to get prepared once you get about 6-7 picks out.
Stephen, last question for you, and we'll let you get back to work, is how important is today with your 2 picks to address defensive needs?
Yeah, obviously, we've been very upfront that we want to, help the defense out. And the way our board's setting up here, we've got some really great defensive players still left on the board that, certainly can do that for us. And I feel like that, we can more than likely, unless just the right situation presents itself, let the draft come to us. And I think when the night's all said and done, we'll have a great opportunity to address the defense and hopefully come away with 2 really good football players.
Well, obviously, all of Cowboys Nation, which I'm very much a part of, appreciated your pick last night, and we personally appreciate you jumping on with us so many times these last 2 weeks to go through everything leading into the draft.
Well, great being on with you guys, and let's have a great weekend for our Cowboy fans, and hopefully we'll make our team a much, much better football team when we're all said and done this weekend.
Absolutely. Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you.